your journey started in West Virginia. So take me back to West Virginia, and how did you go from, Appalachia to now being a tech founder?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it started in the Philippines. I was born there. I was born in Manila, and I'm from a really small island down south. It's an island of Mindanao, and I grew up there with my family and just a single mom. And so she was would work up in Manila and send money back home down south. And I grew up with my aunts and my uncles. And so I was raised by them. And so I really had this great community upbringing. And then, I tried to visit there every so often. At the age of 7, my mom came back from Manila and said, we're moving to the United States. I was like, what's that, And she, said, we're moving here. I met my stepdad, pack your bags. And it was kind of one of the pivotal moments for me, kind of leaving everything, leaving the comfortable, my family, everything I know, my language even, pack your bags, and we're headed to West Virginia. And
how old were you when that happened?
I was 7.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and so I landed in Detroit International Airport, and in my head, I was thinking I'm landing in a mixture of Hollywood and New York. I think I saw Home Alone recently, so I'm like, it's going to be what the United States is, right? I land in West Virginia at the airport there, and I'm like, what is this? There's more trees. There's there's barely any buildings. This is not New York. And so I think that was a really formative experience for me, and especially getting into my experience as a founder of being really comfortable being outside of your own skin, being comfortable being different. I grew up in a town that you can count the number of stoplights that were there. Out of 1,000 people in my school, I was the only person of Asian descent. There's one other Black person that's there in my school. So just to give you an idea of what the demographics look like. And I just had to be really comfortable being different and doing my own thing. When I landed in 2nd grade, I couldn't speak English. So that was really tough, as you can imagine. And I stuck to reading a lot of books, and I feel like I really got to learn about the world through that. Interest in fantasy, science fiction. And to be honest, I think it really helped me become a good listener and helped me become somebody who can pay attention to the words on the page, because I wasn't really able to speak and talk and have conversations with people until much later. But I loved it. I mean, Appalachia was an amazing place because I feel like I got an all-American childhood. I grew up playing football. I was, all taking leadership positions around the town. And it was really a place that I felt like I was able to come into my own and get my own confidence. And, then the world changed once more once I got a letter saying that I would be attending Stanford University in my senior year of high school. And so that was an incredible opportunity.
So you're accepted into Stanford. What an amazing accomplishment, first of all. As a immigrant from the Philippines who has persevered and transcended his environment to now achieve the highest of the high coming out of high school, how do you celebrate in Appalachia before you head off to Stanford?
Yeah, this is really funny. I think my summer job right before I went out to the West Coast was I worked as a janitor at a medical device warehouse. It was the best thing that you could do as a college student. I mean, as a high school student, it's paid well, and you clock in, you clock out. That's where I developed my coffee habit, I think. But it was kind of a Sisyphean task. You come in, and it's just huge rows. I mean, it's a huge warehouse just filled with everything you can think of that takes part in today's care environment. You got sutures, catheters, multi-$1,000 boxes of these sutures that you better not drop them, and it was amazing. It gave me an insight into the broad array of products that surgeons, clinicians use to go deliver modern healthcare. It was amazing. Unfortunately, all I did all day was just dust boxes, sweep the floors, and you work so hard coming in, let's say the day before. The next day you come in, looks exactly the same after night shift has went through. But it was a really formative experience. I think one of the things that you learn is, one, it was nice to have a little pocket money, gas money, from that. I think the second thing that you learn is that you get to see everything that people have created that impact patient health. And then the third thing was every time I clocked in for my shift, I'd listen to these audio notes from this little class called How to Start a Startup. And at the time, it was taught by Sam Altman, and it was these notes, this podcast style from Stanford. And I'd listen to that and learn about go-to-market, learn about how to do customer, basically talking to your customers, making something people want. Is a lot of that reflected in when future in the future when we would go get accepted into YC. But it's really fun to just kind of see that full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an amazing story. It's super cool. You were accepted into YC, and I'm hoping you had a chance to meet Sam Altman at some point. Did that ever happen? Or
no, he was already out there open AI. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, well maybe one day, man.
Yeah, maybe just all that. I feel like, well, yeah, exactly. Gotta give him thank you for that, because I mean, it just one of those things that when you come from a state like that, I think it can be really hard to understand what the world is like. It's a very homogenous community. It's a very wonderful community, and my family's still all there. I have a little brother who's still in high school there, and so it still means a lot to me. And in fact, one of our largest investors is from West Virginia, and he was a great mentor to me. Somebody who was really went out and found success, and is now going back and bringing that back. His name's Brad Smith. He's the president of Marshall University, but before that, he was the CEO of Intuit. And he helped see their rise as, through the mobile social kind of phase, going from something where you bought TurboTax off the shelf to now it's on your phone. Right. It was just tax season, tax day recently, right? And he's just been a really amazing mentor to us. And to see him move his whole family from Menlo Park back, give back in a very meaningful way, create these programs is amazing. And that's something I want to do. And a big part of how we're building Illuminate is making sure that this can scale not just to your big healthcare centers, right? Your big academic centers, but also having them be usable in rural clinics, places where there's that one doctor that sees almost everything that coming in the case. And that's something that I think my background growing up in Appalachia really taught me is how does this work for everybody? Not just for your big academic centers.
Yeah, that's a amazing story of perseverance. Going from, arriving in West Virginia in second grade, not being able to speak English, to by the time you're graduating high school, you're on your way to Stanford, the premier university, one of the premier universities in the United States. That's an incredible story, an incredible journey, man.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say about growing up in a place like that and kind of how it ties in with what we work with Illuminant is, unfortunately, West Virginia, when you look at the rankings especially around public health, healthcare, we come in pretty dead last. And I think a lot of that is exacerbated by the poverty in the state. And so, we are probably, I think, like 50th in obesity, and in terms of percentage of aging population over the age of 65, was coming to like, third highest, right? And I grew up seeing a lot of the detriments that had to people in terms of mobility, addiction, aging, just having a healthy life. And not only, it's a multi-generational thing as well. You can see how that impacts grandparents, parents, children. And I knew pretty early on that I wanted to work in medicine. What I wasn't sure about when I was going to college is what that would take to Formative. Did I want to be a clinician, a doctor? Did I want to be in, more in the engineering side, building things? And so it's pretty funny. I applied with a degree for I think it was biomechanical engineering. I wanted to go build prosthetics and build stuff that people could use in medicine. And, I ended up going into electrical engineering, but it's kind of fun that what I'm doing now is kind of, it's exactly what I put on the paper, all those years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So at what point at Stanford did you come to the realization and acceptance that this was going to be your path into entrepreneurship and becoming a medtech founder?
So I knew that when I went in, I wanted to go learn as many skills I could to build things. But I think the more important thing is, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, when you ask them what drives them, it's building things. And for me, it's that, but building them in a team. I know that with my own working style, I can only go so far by myself. And I made it a point in college to join clubs and teams that, I get that experience of working with people. And, it's amazing. I mean, in a place like that, I got to work with such amazing, bright people that today I still work with, or, I look up to. They're able to do some awesome stuff. And I think I basically got that sense when I was working in a few different projects, but I joined this club called the Stanford Student Space Initiative. And it's, you build CubeSats, rockets, and that's actually where I met two people who changed my life. They were the co-founders of the first startup that I joined right at college. And I, two best things I ever did. One was that club. Second was studying abroad. Came back from studying abroad and I was sitting down at a cafe and, Jake, who was the co-founder there, we're sitting having coffee and he said, I'm building this new thing. We're going to apply some advanced signals processing techniques to make LiDAR better. LiDAR, for, if you don't know, it's using light, kind of like radar, to see the world around you and see for self-driving cars.
Yeah.
I said, that's cool. Is that, a student club project? He's like, no, I just got out of this seminar and I talked to this VC and they gave me $100,000 and we're going to go do it for real. I said, that's amazing. And that foundational experience was like, wow, this person just came up, had this vision, this idea of how to build the future, and they just, they're seizing that. And I thought that was really powerful. And that was actually my first job out of college, just working with these two folks to work in this company, taking that from three of us in this apartment in SF, right next to the Caltrain station. We lived in the apartments above, and then one of the co-founders slept in the offices in the apartment below. Seeing that through, hiring the core team, raising a $15 million Series A, creating these powerful partnerships with all these different automotive manufacturers. It was awesome. It was an amazing experience that taught me, you could do this.
That's really interesting. So before I dive into that segment, just before we leave Stanford, I've talked with quite a few founders who either have attended Stanford or are part of the faculty at Stanford in different departments. And one thing they talk about is the culture and how the culture of innovation is contagious. And even if you weren't thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, it's very hard to not head into that direction because, like you said, there's so many bright people who are building the future and have grand visions for the future and want to actually take action and bring those visions to fruition in reality. And I just wanted to see if that was consistent with your experience. I know that you met your co-founder there, and like you said, he was off to the races. And right, we're coming out of college, we're heading into our first role. But did you feel that same feeling while you were at Stanford, or was this more of just an opportunistic, thing that came right to your front door and you took full advantage of it?
Whenever my co-founder now and I would sit down and do problem sets, homework, over dinner, half the time our conversation would get derailed by, what kind of company would we want to build? And we had this running joke for a long time of, you're going to be the chief sanitation officer. You're just going to clean up the office. Like, don't worry, I got you. And so, I mean, it is in the air. It's, I think it's pervasive of this idea of you're probably going to find the person you're going to work on your life's work with here. And luckily for me, I found that really early on in James. He and I, we lived in the same freshman dorm together. And we grew up, or we went through college, doing our first problem sets together in chemistry. And that's, where I got humbled of like, wow, I'm dealing with world-class people here, all the way through to when he first reached out to me and said, I've got this interesting idea. I've got this interesting project that maybe you can help me work on. And that's how it starts. And I can tell you that that's true across a lot of my friends, where, you feel so inspired, not just by the problem, but also you want to take that opportunity to work with a person. And that's exactly how I felt here. And that's kind of how my journey comes full circle. Because when I first started university, I wanted to, I became an electrical engineer because I wanted to learn a wide variety of things. And, James going through, being a clinician himself, he's the person who drew me back into the application. So it feels like a perfect fit.
Absolutely. Okay. And what was the name of the company, the first startup that you worked at?
The first startup I worked at was called Red Leader.
Red Leader.
Red Leader Technology.
Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned $15 million Series A, contracts with automotive manufacturers. What were some of the biggest lessons, particularly, that you learned, not only about how to succeed as a startup, but some of the traps of startups as well that you now carry over into this experience with Illuminant Surgical?
I think the most fundamental lesson that I learned is it really is about the people and how you treat people, treating them with respect, and, choosing the right people to work for you, and work with you. I think, as a founder and a CEO, if you look across the board, across the industry, it seems that the best founders are the ones that can curate and nurture the talent that they work with and the people they work with. And I saw firsthand, my co-founders really, treat people with respect, choose to create a kind culture. And I think that runs counter to a lot of, run as fast as you can until you burn out. And that's something that, we do here at Illuminate today, is making sure that we treat people well, and making sure that, it's about creating the right kind of environment for them to do their best work. And that was a really powerful lesson. I think one of the things that I carried into this company, that I wanted to do differently, was having a really clear focus on who the users are and what that looks like. And that's kind of where I get a lot of help, or the person who really manages that is James. Him being in the operating room, having gone through his medical training himself, speaking the language of people who are clinicians and surgeons, it's something that's, kept our eyes on the prize from day one.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So, Red Leader is the first startup experience. What happens between Red Leader and the founding of Illuminate? So, yeah, I would love to know the genesis story of how you and James started this company.
So after Red Leader, I actually went back to go get my master's. And this was right around COVID. And, what I wanted to do was I wanted to take my career back towards medicine. And I didn't know what that was going to look like just yet. But, I was thinking, brain-computer interfaces, it'd be really cool to kind of work somewhere where I can use my electrical engineering skills into that. And I actually went back and I had my master's sponsored by Apple, or fully funded by Apple, because I was going to work on their chips, actually, for the iPhone. And so I had the scholarship to learn how to design and build chips. And that's what I thought what I was going to do. When one day I got it was either a phone call or a text message that said, "Hey, I'd like to get your opinion on something." And it was James reaching out. He was in his final year of medical school. And he said, I've been rotating around. I just finished some rotations in surgery. And do you know the way that surgeons are, figuring out how to go about the human body right now? And, he described these different workflows. I was like, I feel like we could do better. We can build something that can help them out. For example, in plastic surgery, let's say you're doing a facial reconstruction. One of the ways that they try to figure out where the bones go, things like that, is they have a CT scan playing a loop, just going through slice by slice. And they're doing all this work. I mean, kudos to them. They're really talented people, but they have to go see the scan on their screen, do the 3D mental math to, move that back to what they're doing in real time with their hands. And so the idea was, is there a way that you can put that information right there on the patient, right? And we had went through and talked about, everything from headsets, things you want to wear, but we saw pretty early on that most surgeons, they didn't like that kind of, takes up valuable headspace, valuable, wear. They just don't want to wear those things for multiple hour procedures. And so there's kind of this idea of like, what if you could use a projector? It's almost like a smart surgical lamp that you bring down from the ceiling, you turn it on, and instead of just getting, light where you need it, you actually get patient-specific information. So we can put things like a CT scan right there where it can show you, here's the bones that you want to work on. Here's where the fracture is. Here's the spinal level that you're looking to do. And what if you could expand that beyond, these indications where you can basically use the operative field and the patient as a screen for whatever you want. So you can say, can you pull up their MRI, put it right here, and you can kind of see that. And so that was the idea.
Wow, that's really unique and a powerful insight. Number one, derived from personal experience from James and his medical rotations, and then knowing who to call, which is you, with your electrical engineering skills and builder background, and now you all form a powerful partnership to found this company. So, walk me through early days. You guys decide to do this. How do things kick off, and what are the early days like here at Illuminate?
So the early days happened in Boston, actually, of all places.
Okay.
We figured, so he was down in Southern California, I was up in Northern California, and we figured, look, let's make this thing real. We were able to get a really small pre-seed round. I mean, I think it would max carried us six months, And we said, but, we want to dive into this head first. I think we need a location shift. So we moved to Boston because, that's the capital of the medical device world of medicine. And we set up in this tiny office. It's smaller than this room. It's just me and him. And we are buying things off of Amazon and creating, the worst prototypes you could imagine. But again, from day one, James was like, whatever you can get us, let's go take that to the hospital as soon as possible. And we were able to meet this really wonderful advisor. His name's Dr. Kurt Yeager. He was the chief resident of neurosurgery there at the time. And, we talked to him. He loved the vision. He loved, this is the future, how, you no longer have to do that translation in your head. You see it and you can start operating. And he brought us in, quiet hours, like 5 a.m. in the morning, nobody there. And we show him just for the first time, what this could look like. And we get some really nice photo and video, from that. And from then on, we sent an application to Y Combinator. And that was another pivotal moment where I don't know what it is about us, but I think the partners really liked the fact that, medtech can be a space that's really slow to move in. There's a lot of regulatory, there's a lot of regulatory steps that you have to go through to make sure it's safe and effective. And that's very important. But I think they really liked maybe our gumption on how do we get this thing out to users as soon as possible, get feedback, and do that in a way that's just scrappy. And so we got into the summer 22 batch. And from then on, it was off to the races. And, how do we now get this into studies that we can do on cadaver? And we're able to do that within 6 months. And then after that, we took about 8 months, I want to say, before we rolled this into a real operating room, patient on the table in an observational study. So, we were using the system just to see how it would behave and see, what that looked like. They weren't using that as sole source of guidance, but that taught us a lot about, how does this actually work in the operating room? What are the things that they don't like? What are the things that surgeons do like? And, that's basically been a core part of our thesis, is try to get this to users' hands as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes total sense. And that's like, I think the ideal approach that any investor or anyone would like to see a founder take is, like I said, getting real world feedback, iterating, speed is the key factor in all of it, but also managing, like you said, the safety aspect of the medical device regulatory requirements. But when it comes to clinician and surgeon feedback, what is it specifically that you got as feedback in those early days about prototype during the observational studies? I assume that there were many conversations that you had and that have informed your design decisions moving forward. I'm super curious to learn about what the market was saying when you put it out there.
So my co-founder by training is a bioengineer. And at the bioengineering program at Stanford, there's a really heavy emphasis on the biodesign principles. And, that is basically a structured way to take you from problem to commercializing a solution. And the very first part of that is this process called the needs finding process. And it's really about making sure that you understand the problem deeply. We talked to 50 surgeons and clinicians in the very early days of the company of, if you had something that can show you that information around the patient, how would that change your practice? And we talked to folks across plastic surgery, orthopedics, pain management, interventional radiology, just all the things where you're doing something clinical, you're doing something operative. And that is where we were able to really qualify how this is useful. And, the main things they said is, one, this has to fit in within our existing workflows, and that's something that we built from the ground up, built our device from the ground up to be able to do that. We were compatible with essentially the standard equipment and instruments that they have. The second thing is this would be profoundly useful when there's so many things about, I think, when people say surgery is an art, this is kind of really helping towards that. How do I size certain things properly? How do I make sure that the implants I'm putting in line up? So that way, when I insert a rod, it goes in the way that I expect, or do I know that my screw's going into the right place? And so that was really valuable feedback. So then the third part was, where do we start? We're going to boil the ocean and then try for all this. We're going to go for the beachhead indication. And that's where we found out that spine surgery is the place to go and do this. Spine surgery is something that is a huge market today. And I think about 1.6 million people need spine surgery. And that's happening every year. And that market is growing as we age more and, we grow older. And, unfortunately, our nation is also fighting an obesity issue. So all interrelated to spine surgery. And so in spine surgery, the bread and butter is something called the spinal fusion. And it's where you put a screw through a very particular channel of the vertebra called the pedicle. And this thing can be, in order of just a few centimeters wide. And you're putting a screw that's, on order of a few centimeters wide. So it's really got to be right in that channel. And if you're too close to the middle, you're going to hit the spinal cord, you're going to hit nerve roots that can really severely impact the pain that you have afterwards. You can come in feeling more pain. And if you're too far to lateral, right? If you don't get that good purchase of the screw, that can lead to the screw basically ripping out, and you go back in for a revision. And so when we looked and we talked to the surgeons and we looked at the data, we realized that there's a really high rate of spinal revision surgery. People having to come back after their first spine surgery because of a misplacement or something along those lines. And so we realized this is the beachhead market. This is somewhere that our technology could be used to help them place screws more accurately, size things well, make sure things line up before they even open up the patient.
Okay. I'd love to understand in fine detail, if you can, in a very, very simplified way, the design and the tech that's powering this. At its core, what is the device actually doing that allows the projection onto the patient that the surgeons now can use within their workflows?
So the device is actually kind of simple from a hardware perspective. You basically just have a projector, and then we have a set of sensors that allow us to track the patient, track the instrument, and understand, with using a depth camera, essentially, what the patient contour looks like. Because you can imagine when you have a projector, you're pointing at your living room wall, right? When you move that in and out, the size of the image is changing, right? And when you're tilting it, that's looking a little different. It's not looking quite as square. And so what we've done is we use that hardware, put that in a box, and we put it at the end of this boom arm that works just like a surgical lamp. You bring it down, point it at the patient, and then what our software does is it takes all that information from those sensors, the contours of the patient, where the patient is, tracking that in real time, tracking your instruments in real time, and we use all that information to project with a high degree of accuracy the information you're looking for. So, for example, one of the things that we can project out is the spine. And so we can show you exactly where the spine is. And as the patient moves, as you're moving around that boom arm, it all stays right in the same place. It all stays right the same size. It's to scale, and that makes sense. And where we're playing at right now is, the quick way that I sometimes tell people is kind of like GPS for the human body, right? You've got a certain set of things that you want to go to a very specific place in the patient. So, for example, screws for spinal fusion. And what our system can do is tell you exactly what kind of anatomy is around your instrument. And as you're pushing in the screw, right, using a screwdriver, it can show you where exactly you're at, if you're on track. And we can do that all basically with no headset. You don't even have to look at a monitor, really. You get to keep your focus right on the patient.
That's quite a technical challenge that you all have undertaken to solve that, because when I imagined it in my mind, it was very much my conception of a projector like we would have on the wall, and it's just kind of this rectangular thing on top of the patient. But what it sounds like is you all have figured out a way to project images and essentially map them to a patient's body, where now it almost looks more like clothes on the patient as opposed to just more of a projected stationary or static image on top of the patient. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's exactly right. And what we're looking to do is increase the amount of, or increase the diversity of imaging that you can import in. So right now we're starting with CT scans, and that's something that you probably have already when you're working these types of surgeries. But we want to be able to bring in MRIs, maybe even merge those together and show you exactly, where the level you're looking at operating is on. Let me give you an example of, why is this kind of thing useful, right? In spine surgery, unfortunately, there are these types of events called wrong level surgeries. And it's literally what it sounds like. You're at the wrong spinal level when when you wanted to operate on, let's say, L5, L4, you're actually up one, L4, L3. And that happens all the time. It can be a very stressful environment. There can be really tough patient anatomy. Somebody has scoliosis. It's really hard to count, right? When you're looking at a film or some image somewhere, and then now you're looking back at the person. It's hard to do that mapping. But now you can just see exactly where you were planning to go. You can see all your plans, all the entry points that you were trying to make, and it all gets highlighted right there. It's self-evident, is the way I think about it.
That's very interesting. And how does the device in the projection onto that patient compare in accuracy to the monitor image that the surgeon is looking or referencing in the current process, such that they can trust the image that's being projected onto the patient?
So we've actually been running accuracy studies over the past few weeks, and we're basically right on. It's equivalent to all of the current ways that surgeons are doing this today, and that's down to sub 2 millimeter. And so that's something that we've been really excited about, to get that kind of data. The novel part is, how do you make sure that the projection is also lined up?
Right.
And so this is the first time this has ever been built. We're actually taking a regulatory pathway that acknowledges that. It's going to be a de novo pathway.
Yeah.
There's nothing else like this on the market, because when we went out, we talked to our FDA review panel. They're like, we really strongly suggest a new thing because we haven't seen something like this before. And so we're actually developing our own methods of validating that, of looking at the accuracy, and that's going to be the standard that everyone's going to be held to if anybody ever wants to follow in our footsteps and build something like this. This is part of the reason now why we're in LA, is we came here because we want to tap into the talent of computer graphics, of software engineers, of people working in animation and video games. And we want them to apply that to medicine, right? I mean, if you think about it, these folks are working on modeling the skeletons and the skin for your major Disney motion pictures, things like that. And what if they're able to use that and do that on people to help model these things and so forth. So one of our teammates actually is a former Disney Imagineer, and he was working on stuff that you could change the clothes of the performer up on stage as they're moving, right, using projectors. Now he's able to use that kind of skill set to go and show you exactly where the skin is, or show you exactly where the spine is, and where to make your incisions and where to cut right on the patient.
It's incredible technology. I'd love to understand how the value you're creating for surgeons in the operating room ends up delivering value for the patient that's on the table as well. I presume there's benefits that are being passed along to the patient by you creating a more efficient and more convenient and accurate way for surgeons to perform their surgeries in the operating. But we'd love to learn specifically, how does this technology drive patient outcomes as well, in addition to being an excellent tool for surgeons in the operating room?
Our long-term vision is to make sure that there are no revision surgeries that happen for patients. That when surgeons want to accomplish plan A, they always do plan A. There's never, something that happens because there was a misjudgment or they didn't have enough insight into what they were doing at that moment. The way I think about it is for planes, right? Back in the days, they're flying that just looking out of the window. And when weather became too rough and, there's a lot of turbulence, it became really tough to do that. Nowadays, you have modern planes and you can fly those entirely by wire with just your instruments, your compass, your GPS. You know exactly what's happening. You've got all of these wide array of sensors information that tell you, I'm on track to land this thing on the runway. And that's kind of the vision that we have for Illuminant, is providing the surgeon with those kinds of tools. So then when you do that, we think that the three key stakeholders in healthcare, they reap the benefits there. So for the surgeon, they get tools that are fit for their practice, fit for the 21st century of how to do this kind of navigation and planning. And that leads to less stress, that leads to more cases, faster turnover, less prep time, and ultimately just allows them to go home sooner, focus on the tough things, right? Rather than have to micromanage every detail. For the patient, we're hoping that means less time underneath or less time, under anesthesia. We think that's going to be lower revisions. More accuracy means, you're getting the right level of fixation. The screws are sized correctly, and just generally that, it's one and done, right? And we know that can happen. I mean, when you look at the revision rates for knee or for hip, that's almost one and done. People go in there, they get that, and their lives change forever. And we want spine surgery, we want to make sure that the errors that contribute to that being not the case, that we can eliminate those.
And revision rates referring to the amount of times where patients have to go underneath for an additional surgery. That's after the initial.
That's right.
Okay.
And then for hospitals, you are basically capturing more value, especially as we're going towards more value-based healthcare, where we are going to pay for the outcome rather than per procedure. We think that this is going to be an invaluable tool, and we're already seeing that reflected in the way that insurance reimburses. This is becoming a mandatory piece of equipment, this kind of technology. And with us building what we think is going to be the best in class, building something that can scale to multiple different specialties and types of care settings, we think that this is going to be as ubiquitous as a surgical lamp, as ubiquitous as the monitor is today to operations.
Outstanding. Can you give me some specific examples of some potential applications for the device in other areas outside of surgery?
Yeah. So one of the most exciting applications that we want to take on is in cancer biopsy, and that's in the field of interventional radiology. And it's a really great fit. That problem is a really great fit for this kind of solution. When you're taking a biopsy, there's some mass or lesion that is deep in the patient body. You're trying to advance a needle to it really carefully to go and get yourself a sample. That's made more complicated by the fact that you don't want to open up the patient. You want that to be as least invasive as possible. So you can't see exactly where you're going. And then the second thing is that patient's breathing. So you're doing a lung biopsy, that's moving by a lot. So how can you use our kind of technology to navigate that? And that's one of the places we're most excited about, is you can use the projective technology to literally tell you take a medical image of the patient they're laying down, and you get an idea of where that tumor is. And let's say you do that when they're at full expiration, so all the air is out of their lungs, and as that patient's breathing, that tumor is moving. What if we can tell you exactly when to advance that needle when the patient's fully expirated, right? And so you can think of it as this little reticle, this like a bullseye that shows up on the patient's back. You have this straight line distance. You're driving this needle in. It's telling you, are you on the right angle? Are you going at the right depth? And it's telling you exactly when to advance it. It turns great when you advance it. And so this is a project that we're looking to start working on as soon as we finish spine surgery.
Outstanding. At the end of the day, you're delivering a lot of value to those three key stakeholders. And then there's the business side of things that, have to integrate with to be able to get it into the operating rooms and for it to become as ubiquitous as you envision. How do you position the device from a business perspective in terms of pricing or cost savings benefits for individual practices or health systems that make it easier for the product to get through the door and be used by as many surgeons as possible?
Absolutely. So I think there's two angles to this. And the first angle is purely cost savings. And then the second angle is I think there's actually a revenue driver story to this. From the first angle, we actually published a study in the Journal of Medical Systems that walks through an economic value to the customer analysis of what a system like ours could deliver to a hospital. And on average, you're looking to save about $2,500 per procedure every time you use this, and potentially more if there are more revisions, right? And so that's something that we already have a dollar number that we can found as a value. So then the second angle is something that we're really excited about when you think about scaling this past a surgery, right? So, for example, if you have back pain, the first thing you do is not going to go and get a spinal fusion. There's more conservative treatment options that you're going to look at first. There's probably physical therapy, and then maybe you move on to things like injections, steroid injections in that place. And then, if that pain persists or deteriorates, then that goes down into a fusion. One of the things that we're really excited about is we think our system is the only system today that allows you to cover that entire continuum of patient care. We can use that same projective platform, guide your most difficult spinal fusions, and also guide your most difficult, I can do these in 3 minutes kind of injections. And the idea there is if a spine surgeon has that, they run their own clinic. What if they get to own that customer journey from the very beginning when that patient has just a little bit of a tweak in their back all the way through to the end, maybe years later when that deteriorates and they're older. And so that's kind of a really interesting thing that we want to be able to investigate. Can having a system that allows you to own the patient journey from day one all the way to the end increase the chance that patient comes back and looks to you as a surgeon to manage their care from the beginning, right? On the flip side of that, when we provide these systems to folks in pain management, can they use that as a driving as a selling point, that we're using millimeter accurate projection systems to make sure that when we put an injection, we're getting that right nerve that's giving you pain. We're always right there in the same spot, and we're hoping that can increase the return rate of patients as they come in, because they know that when they go to this pain management doctor, they always feel better afterwards because they don't miss. They sometimes call it like a muscle block because it all just goes into the muscle and not right where you want it to go.
Excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. Where are you guys currently in development, and what are some of the key milestones you all need to hit moving forward?
So we're in a really exciting time of the company where we're about finished with R&D. We're about to get to a design freeze here within the next few months, and then it's putting together all of the data that prove our safety, our accuracy, packaging that and sending it off to the FDA. And we're looking to do that sometime later this year. We're looking to do that likely at the end of this year in November. So we're really excited for that. We have already been running essentially a lot of these accuracy studies, making sure that we're accurate. So we feel pretty good about being able to get there. And that's going to kick off a whole new kind of category of devices that, that we're excited about. In parallel, we're running pilots and studies with our partners. So we're really fortunate to work with the directors of the Spine Center here at USC Keck School of Medicine. And they come in every month and we get feedback from them. We're doing accuracy studies with them, and we're getting, the kind of key opinion leader advice and insights that you don't have a substitute for that. And so as soon as we get that clearance, we're gonna run a multi-center pilot where we are, going to work with the top spine surgeons in these locations. We're going to, get their feedback, get paid for these cases. And then by the end of this year, we're likely also looking to obtain a investigational device exemption. And what that means is we can start using these on clinical studies in real patients. And so we're kind of trying to parallelize all of these different paths with the idea of we want to get this into patients as soon as possible, in a safe manner. But we think that that's going to be a place where we'll be able to learn a lot on how we can make this better, more accessible, expand this to different types of specialties.
Are there any additional market activities or activations that you guys have, for industry conferences or anything to continue to strengthen your reach and I guess visibility within the community?
We're doing our first unveiling at the Global Spine Congress this year in May in 2025 here at Rio de Janeiro.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so we're really excited about that. We're going to take center stage, up there with, I think we might be the only startup that's taking that kind of stage, but that's because we work with some great spine surgeons who really want to see us, showcase this to all of the different clinicians that are going to be there, as well as the strategics. And so, we're fortunate to work with Dr. Jeff Wong. He's the founder of the Global Spine Congress. He started that, I think, in 2009, and it's been going every year, and it just gets bigger and bigger. So this year, we're going to be presenting to about 6,000 people, on where this technology is for spine surgery and the different applications that we'll be able to unlock here in the next bit.
Excellent. Well, Eldrick, it was great to speak with you. I'm extremely excited and thrilled about everything you all are building here at Illuminant Surgical. Really excited for this technology. I think it's going to be transformative, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, and I'm really excited to continue to support you moving forward.
Thanks, AJ.